February 14th, 1943. E08, 57 a.m., Sidi, Tunisia. 46 brand new Sherman tanks roll into the Valley Cruise inside, believing their industrial armor makes them invincible. From 2 kilometers away, guns they cannot see are already aimed at their hearts. The Germans fire first. Steel rips through steel. Men burn alive inside machines that were supposed to protect them. In 17 minutes, the valley becomes a graveyard. The paradox is brutal America's newest tanks die to weapons they never even saw. This is the morning American armored warfare learns what the Germans already know, that confidence without experience is just another word for target. Dust swallows the ridgelines. The air tastes like diesel and fear. Inside, the Shermans machines, fresh from factories in Detroit and Gary untouched by battle crews, average 22 years old. Most have never heard a shot fired in anger. They believe they hold the advantage. Superior numbers, modern armor, the weight of American industry behind every rivet. But a paradox waits in the silence. The enemy they cannot see already sees them. From hidden positions camouflaged among thorn scrub and rocky outcrops, Rommel's 80mm guns track targets through precision optics. Fingers rest on triggers. Breathing steadies. The math is already done: 2,000 meters, 820 meters per second, a 100mm penetration. The Shermans have no chance. The first shot comes without warning. A Sherman erupts, turret spinning through smoke, ammunition cooking off in a fountain of flame. Men scream inside steel that becomes a furnace in seconds. Then another tank explodes, then 3 more. Armor meant to project American industrial strength peels apart like tinfoil under rounds moving faster than sound. Crews bail out into machine gun fire. Bodies fall. Some burn before they die. Others die before they burn. Within 17 minutes, 46 Allied tanks are burning across the valley floor. German losses 0, and the entire Allied flank begins to buckle under an enemy that turned patience and precision into a slaughterhouse. How do you survive when every lesson you learned becomes irrelevant the moment real war begins? Late 1942. North Africa becomes the proving ground where American confidence collides with German experience, and only one of them survives contact. Rommel retreats westward from El Alamein, battered but unbroken, pursued by Montgomery's 8th Army. The Afrika Korps falls back into Tunisia, where reinforcements from the 5th Panzer Army wait in the mountain passes. These are not fresh recruits. These are veterans who survived Tobruk, Gazala, Halfaya Pass, and the long retreat across Libya. Men who learn to fight in a desert that kills the careless and rewards cunning. Into this cauldron arrives the U.S. 1st Armored Division. Over 400 Sherman tanks roll off transport ships, fast, reliable, mechanically sound. The pride of American mass production. Factory paint still gleaming. Crews average 22 years old. Most joined up after Pearl Harbor. They trained at Fort Knox on flat ranges where targets don't shoot back. They've never heard a shot fired in anger. They've never smelled burning flesh. They've never watched friends die screaming inside steel coffins. They're about to learn all 3. The terrain itself is a weapon they don't understand. The gaps at Fide Pass, the plains around Sidi, the high plateaus leading to Kasserine all form natural kill zones for anyone who knows how to use them. Rommel studies the maps and sees opportunity where Americans see open desert. He sees ridgelines that hide gun positions, valleys that funnel armor into overlapping fields of fire, approaches that force attackers to expose their flanks. The Germans have spent 3 years turning North Africa into a laboratory for armored warfare. Every tactic has been tested. Every mistake has been paid for in blood. Every lesson has been written in the wreckage of British, Australian, and South African tanks. The Americans arrive with doctrine written in peacetime by men who never faced an 88mm gun. The Shermans carry 75mm guns effective to 800 meters, adequate for most engagements in theory. The German 80mm anti-tank guns kill cleanly at 2,000 meters, proven in practice across 3 years as Desert War. At maximum range, an 88mm range round penetrates 110 millimeters of armor. A Sherman's frontal protection is 70 millimeters at best. The math doesn't lie. In the western desert, German crews learned to dig gun positions into rocky outcrops where shadows and terrain break up silhouettes. They learned to camouflage barrels with thorn scrub and netting. They learned to sight guns in pairs, one to kill, one to cover. They learned to wait. Patience is a skill purchased with survival. The Americans have training, equipment, confidence. The Germans have experience. Technology may be on America's side. Industrial capacity is overwhelming. Doctrine is sound on paper. But experience is not taught in classrooms. It's earned in moments where hesitation means death and mistakes are paid for immediately. The 1st Armored Division rolls forward with the certainty that comes from never having lost. Never having watched an entire company burn in 17 minutes. Never having realized too late that the enemy saw them long before they saw the enemy. German gunners watch through optics. Fingers rest on triggers. Breathing steady. They've done this before. They know exactly what's about to happen. The gap between confidence and competence is measured in the time it takes a high-velocity round to cross 2 kilometers of empty air. And in Tunisia, that gap is about to be measured in burning Shermans and dead American crews who believed industrial might was enough. What happens when soldiers trained for victory meet soldiers trained by survival? In January 31st, 1943, Faid Pass. The first American probing attack moves through the gap at dawn. 11 Shermans advance in column formation, textbook deployment for terrain assumed secure. Commanders back at headquarters study maps that show empty desert. Intelligence reports suggest light resistance. The intelligence is wrong. From camouflage positions 1,800 meters away, 88 Pulimeter guns have been waiting since before sunrise. German gunners track the column through optics. Range is calculated. Windage is negligible. The lead Sherman rolls directly into the center of the kill zone. The gun commander gives the order fire. The math is simple and brutal. An 80 mm armor-piercing round travels at 820 meters per second. At 1 toward 800 meters, it arrives in 2.2 seconds. Sherman frontal armor, 51 mm at the hull, 76 mm at the turret, might as well be cardboard against a round designed to penetrate 110 mm at this range. The lead tank explodes before the crew hears the shot. The second Sherman tries to reverse tracks, chewing sand in panic, but the next round punches through the engine deck. Diesel ignites. The fire spreads to the crew compartment in seconds. Ammunition cooks off in a chain reaction that lifts the turret 3 meters into the air and slams it down upside down on the burning hull. Inside the third Sherman, a loader 19 years old from Michigan, 3 months out of training, screams for another round. His hands shake as he rams the shell home. The gunner traverses right, searching for a target he cannot see. Before he can fire, an 80mm round enters through the turret front at 820 meters per second, passes through the breech of the 75mm gun, and exits through the rear armor. 3 men die instantly, bodies torn apart by metal moving faster than sound. The loader survives with shrapnel embedded across his face and chest. Blood fills his eyes. He can't see. He can't breathe. He crawls toward the hatch hands, slipping on metal slick with blood and hydraulic fluid. He makes it out, falls 3 meters to the sand. Machine gun fire stitches the ground around him. Dust chokes his lungs. He tries to run, but his legs won't work. He doesn't make it far. 11 tanks burn before the attack is called off. The crews who survive stumble back through the pass, carrying wounded men and the knowledge that everything they learned in training just became irrelevant. 2 weeks later, February 14th, Sidi, American commanders are under pressure. Eisenhower wants results. Patton isn't here yet. The current leadership believes aggression and firepower can overcome German defensive positions. They commit Combat Command A over 50 tanks and supporting infantry to seize the high ground east of the town. The attack goes forward despite reports of German armor concentrations in the area, despite warnings from reconnaissance units. despite the wreckage still burning at Fayed Pass. Confidence overrides caution. The Shermans advance across open ground at 0830. The valley is 2 kilometers wide. Rocky ridges border both sides. To the east, high ground dominates the approaches. It looks like terrain to be seized. It's actually a kill zone perfected over 3 years of desert warfare. From 3 sides, Rommel springs the trap. Panzer IVs with long-barreled 75mm guns emerge from hidden positions among the ridges' hulls, concealed behind rocks, only turrets exposed. They fire from 100 to 200 meters, close enough to guarantee kills, far enough to remain outside effective Sherman range. Each shot is aimed, each shot hits. Shermans erupt across the valley floor like matches struck in sequence. From elevated positions on the ridges, 80mm guns open fire at 2,000 meters. Rounds arrive before the sound. Turrets are blown off hulls. Ammunition explodes inside crew compartments. Men burn alive or die from overpressure lungs, collapsed organs, ruptured bodies intact but dead before they hit the floor. Shermans trying to maneuver hit mines planted during the night. Tracks snap. Hulls immobilize. Each disabled tank becomes a stationary target for guns that don't miss at this range. Crews bail out into machine gun fire. Bodies pile up beside burning wrecks. 46 to 100 Allied tanks are destroyed across the valley in less than 3 hours. German loss is none. The crews who survived the initial onslaught try to retreat, but panzer formations have already circled behind them, cutting escape routes. The trap is complete. Half-tracks carrying infantry are caught in the open and shredded by 20mm cannon fire. Bodies lie scattered across sand already dark with oil and blood. Wounded men scream for help that never comes. By noon, Combat Command A ceases to exist as a fighting force. Then comes Kasserine. In February 19, 1943, Rommel launches Operation Frühlings I, the spring breeze that tears through American lines like a hurricane through paper. German armor punches through the Kasserine Pass, defended by scattered American units cobbled together from whoever was available, engineers who trained to build bridges, artillery crews who should be 5 kilometers behind the front rear echelon supply troops, suddenly fighting as infantry with rifles they barely know how to use. Nobody is prepared for what hits them. Panzers roll over fighting positions. Infantry scatter. Coordination collapses within the first hour. Radio discipline breaks down into panic calls, contradictory orders, and static. Officers lose contact with their units. Men retreat in groups, in pairs, alone, stumbling through mountain passes with no idea where friendly lines are anymore or if friendly lines even exist. Half-tracks attempt to return fire, but nothing stops the advance. Panzers shrug off 37mm rounds like rain. German infantry follow behind armor-clearing positions with grenades and machine pistols. The Americans fall back, then fall back again, then stop falling back in order and just run. The line breaks completely. Over 3 days, American forces retreat nearly 100 kilometers. Equipment is abandoned tanks out of fuel trucks with blown engines, artillery pieces spiked and left behind. Supply dumps are overrun. Ammunition stockpiles captured, fuel reserves burned, entire battalions lose cohesion. Men wander through the mountains trying to find their units or any unit or anyone who can tell them where to go. At Thala, American artillery crews make a final stand. They fire over open sights at advancing panzers, 150mm howitzers and 105mm guns depressed to minimum elevation, firing directly into German formations 400 meters away. Loaders work until their hands bleed. Gunners fire until barrels glow cherry red. Shell casings pile up around gun positions like brass snowdrifts. Some guns are overrun. The crews die at their posts. Bodies slumped over breeches shells, still gripped in dead hands, faces frozen in the moment they realized they weren't going to make it. But they buy time. Enough time for reserves to arrive, enough time for the line to stabilize, enough time for the retreat to become a defense instead of a rout. The butcher's bill comes due over 6,000 American casualties in 1 week. Hundreds of tanks lost. Morale shattered. Confidence replaced by the cold understanding that industrial superiority means nothing if the men operating the machines don't know how to survive. Inexperience collides with brutal battle-forged tactics. The collision produces casualties measured not in dozens but in hundreds. Shattered units. Broken morale. Men who believed American power was invincible now know the taste of defeat, bitter metallic mixed with the smoke of burning friends. And the survivors begin to understand what it means to learn warfare from an enemy who has already mastered it, that every lesson costs lives, that mistakes are paid for immediately, and that the only students who graduate are the ones still alive when the shooting stops. Can an army transform fast enough to avoid annihilation when every lesson is written in the blood of men who didn't survive long enough to apply it? War becomes a chess match played in sand and smoke, where every wrong move is paid for in burning steel and screaming men. Rommel's method is surgical, precise, lethal. He deploys the 80mm gun as the centerpiece of his defensive doctrine. The weapon, originally designed as anti-aircraft artillery, proves devastatingly effective against armor. Mounted on cruciform carriages concealed in defilade positions behind ridges, these guns create overlapping fields of fire that turn valleys into killing grounds. The tactic is deceptively simple: allow American tanks to advance into a prepared zone, engage from maximum range with 88s that outrange Sherman guns by over 1,000 meters, then maneuver Panzer IVs to flanking positions while the Shermans are fixed in place. By the time American crews realize they're in an ambush, escape routes are already cut. The mathematics of lethality heavily favor the defender. An 80mm gun fires an armor-piercing round at 820 meters per second, nearly twice the velocity of a Sherman's 75mm. At 2,000 meters, the 88 penetrates 110mm of armor. At the same range, a Sherman's 75mm struggles to penetrate 70mm. German gunners fire from concealment, American crews fire at shadows while real threats remain invisible. Rommel uses ridgelines as cover for flanking maneuvers. Panzers advance behind terrain features, appearing suddenly at 300 meters, close enough that even Sherman guns become lethal. But by then, formations are already disrupted. Crews panicked, coordination shattered. American commanders initially respond with doctrine learned at Fort Knox and Fort Benning: aggressive frontal assaults, rapid maneuver, overwhelming firepower. In theory, sound. In practice, suicidal. Each attack feeds more tanks into carefully prepared kill zones. Each charge widens Rommel's body count. After Kasserine, the wreckage speaks louder than any report. Over 6,000 casualties, hundreds of tanks destroyed. The math is undeniable. American forces are losing at a rate that will make North Africa unwinnable. Something has to change. Fast. In March 6, 1943, George S. Patton assumes command of the Secours Corps. He arrives wearing polished boots, ivory-handled revolvers, pressed uniform a peacock among bloodied, exhausted men who resent his parade ground mentality. His first actions seem insane to Kasserine survivors. He enforces uniform standards, punishes failures in military courtesy, restores formality to a chain of command that dissolved into chaos during retreat. Soldiers who survived hell resent being yelled at for missing a button. But Patton isn't rebuilding appearances. He's rebuilding something deeper: the psychological framework that allows men to function under fire. When shells fall and friends burn and every instinct screams to run, discipline is the structure that keeps men fighting instead of fleeing. Within days, the focus shifts to tactical reorganization. Patton studies German methods obsessively, not to copy them, but to counter them. He reads captured documents, interrogates prisoners, analyzes wreckage. He identifies the pattern: German success depends on forcing American armor into predetermined kill zones where 88mm guns dominate. The solution is counterintuitive: stop attacking like Americans are supposed to attack. Hull down positions where only turrets are exposed. Reverse slope defenses where tanks wait behind crests until enemy armor commits to the valley. coordination between tank destroyers, artillery, and infantry, combined arms executed with precision instead of desperation. No heroic charges. Patience weaponized. At El Gueter, Patton selects defensive terrain that favors Americans for the first time. High ridges overlook approaches from three sides. Rocky outcrops provide natural cover. Fields of fire extend beyond 1,000 meters, far enough for American tank destroyers armed with 3-inch guns to engage German armor before panzers can close to effective range. The plan is meticulous. Infantry dig fighting positions along ridges. Half-tracks are positioned hull down behind earthen berms built through the night. 31 M10 tank destroyers, each mounting a 3-inch gun capable of penetrating 100 mm of armor at 1,000 meters, are carefully sighted to create interlocking fields of fire. No gaps. No dead zones. Artillery batteries zero in on pre-registered points across the valley floor. Forward observers position themselves on the heights with radios and binoculars. Their job: call fire when German armor enters the kill zone. Keep talking until every target burns. The plan depends on discipline. Patton spent 2 weeks rebuilding, wait for German formations to commit to the valley, allow them to enter the killing zone, then open fire simultaneously across multiple positions. No premature shots. No individual heroics. Methodical, synchronized destruction. It's a tactic borrowed from the Germans and turned against them. Patience weaponized terrain transformed into an ally, defensive fire concentrated to overwhelm. Rommel taught the Americans how to lose. Now they're going to show him they learned. For the first time since landing in North Africa, American armor will fight on ground. They chose using tactics refined through blood, applying lessons paid for, with lives of men who burned at Fied and Sidi and Kasserine. The question is whether survivors have learned fast enough, whether 2 weeks of reorganization can overcome 3 years of German experience, whether American resilience can match German precision, whether soldiers who learned warfare through catastrophic defeat can stand against veterans who have never lost in North Africa. The valley at El Gueter will answer that question. And the answer will be written in burning panzers or burning Shermans, one or the other, no middle ground. When doctrine meets reality, which survives the plan written in peacetime or the adaptation forged in blood. During the chaos of Kasserine, C Company of the 805th Tank Destroyer Battalion becomes cut off behind German lines. 17 M3 half-tracks armed with 75 mm guns. 63 men. Surrounded on 3 sides by advancing panzer formations. Radio contact lost. Ammunition running low. No clear route of retreat. The company commander, Captain William Carey, makes radio contact with a forward air controller. The response is blunt withdrawal through the main pass is impossible. German armor controls every approach. Staying in position means annihilation by morning. Then a forbidden idea emerges. 2 P-38 Lightning fighters appear overhead, making low passes over the trapped formation. The lead pilot rocks his wings, a signal. He's indicating a route southwest over mountainous terrain, officially labeled impassable for vehicles. The path crosses boulder fields, dry riverbeds, slopes graded at angles that will roll vehicles if taken too fast. No roads, no reconnaissance. Maps mark the terrain with warnings unsuitable for mechanized movement. Attempting it at night risks losing half-tracks to broken axles, rollovers, or simply getting stuck in terrain that will leave the crews exposed to German patrols by dawn. Survival seems impossible. Retreat seems impossible. Carey makes the call. They take the impossible route. The column moves in darkness. Drivers navigating by moonlight and the dim glow of hooded headlights. Half-tracks lurch over rocks, tilting at angles that make men grip the sides and pray. Engines scream in low gear. Transmissions grind. One vehicle throws a track, climbing a boulder field. The crew abandons it, piling into other vehicles already overloaded. A dry riverbed nearly stops them. The banks are too steep for a direct crossing. Engineers use sledgehammers and pry bars to cut a ramp into the crumbling stone. The lead vehicle crosses then another each one, threatening to tip sideways as wheels lose traction on loose gravel. They emerge 31 hours later, exhausted, battered, filthy, but intact. 61 men survive. What should have been an annihilation becomes a revelation. Rommel's reach is overstretched. His supply lines are thinning. The Luftwaffe cannot maintain air superiority everywhere. And American units, when led by officers willing to improvise, can survive conditions that doctrine says should kill them. The escape doesn't make headlines. No medals are awarded, but word spreads through the ranks the Germans are not invincible. Patton hears the story and incorporates it into his understanding of what's possible. He begins to see not just the failures of American doctrine, but the potential resilience of American soldiers when doctrine fails. The survivors of C Company are reassigned, their half-tracks replaced. They carry with them a knowledge that cannot be taught in training, that survival sometimes requires breaking every rule, and that the line between defeat and escape can be measured in the courage to attempt what should be impossible. It's a small moment in a large campaign, but small moments accumulate, and by March, those moments are beginning to tip the balance. What happens when desperation forces innovation and survival becomes a choice made in defiance of impossible odds? In March 23, 1943, El Gueter, Patton draws the line. The terrain is favorable, for once ridges on three sides overlook a valley 2 kilometers wide. American forces hold the high ground. 31 M10 tank destroyers equipped with 3-inch guns capable of firing at over 1,000 meters are positioned hull down along the eastern ridge. Their barrels, capable of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor at range, cover every approach. Behind them, artillery batteries, 105 millimeters howitzers and 155 millimeters long toms zero in on pre-registered targets across the valley floor. Forward observers positioned on the heights have clear lines of sight. Infantry occupy fighting positions along the slopes. Half-tracks sit hull down behind berms, ready to shift fire across multiple sectors. At 06:00, German reconnaissance probes the American positions. Light fire, feeling for weak points. At 06:30, the main assault begins. 70 to 75 German tanks, mostly Panzer III and I-4, advance in coordinated formations. They expect American armor to meet them in the valley. They expect mobility and aggression. They expect inexperienced crews to make the same mistakes that cost 46 tanks at Sidi. Instead, they find patience. The American tank destroyers wait, engines off, crews silent. Gunners track targets through optics, calculating lead and windage. The range closes 1,400 meters, 1,200 meters, 1,000 meters. At 950 meters, the order comes fire. 31 guns fire within seconds of each other. The valley erupts. A Panzer forward takes a round through the turret ring. The crew bails out into machine gun fire. Another tank loses its right track. Immobilized, it becomes a stationary target for a second round that penetrates the frontal armor and ignites ammunition stored in the hull. The turret lifts off in a fountain of flame. German formations try to maneuver, but artillery fire begins to fall. Time-on-target concentrations that bracket advancing panzers in explosions that throw track links and shrapnel across the sand. Smoke obscures visibility. Radios fill with confusion. Commanders lose situational awareness. The panzers slow to 5 kilometers per hour. They try to withdraw to cover regroup and assault from a different angle, but every withdrawal exposes flanks. Every pause allows American gunners to reposition and fire again. For 12 hours, the battle grinds forward. German armor makes 3 separate attempts to break through. Each time, coordinated American fire tank destroyers, artillery, and dug-in infantry stops the advance. Tracks snap under sustained fire. Engines burst into flame. Crews abandon vehicles and try to walk back through artillery barrages. Bodies pile up in gullies where men sought cover that didn't exist. By 18:00, the valley floor is littered with 30 to 40 burning German tanks. Crews who survive the hits try to walk back to their lines through artillery fire. Some make it, many don't. German formations unable to break American coordination cannot penetrate the line. For the first time in North Africa, American armor doctrine adaptation forged from the lessons of Sidi and Kasserine holds against veteran German tactics. The panzers withdraw after nightfall. They leave behind wrecked vehicles, dead crews, and the knowledge that American forces are no longer the inexperienced formation they faced 6 weeks earlier. El Guitar doesn't end the North African campaign, but it proves something more important the Americans can learn. They can adapt. And adaptation paid for in blood creates soldiers capable of standing against the best the Wehrmacht can deploy. The survivors of those first terrible battles at Faid and Kasserine, the ones who watched their friends burn, who crawled from wrecked Shermans, who learned that confidence is not the same as competence, those men now hold the line. They don't do it because they're fearless. They do it because they've already faced the worst and survived it. When machines meet mastery, who determines the outcome, the engineers who built the steel or the soldiers who learned to use it, the Shermans that once vanished to invisible 80mm guns now hold their ground. In April 1943, Rommel, exhausted and ill, is recalled to Germany. He leaves behind a deteriorating tactical situation. British forces press from the east. American forces, reorganized and aggressive under Patton's command, press from the west. Supply lines across the Mediterranean collapse under Allied air and naval interdiction. By early May, Axis forces in Tunisia are compressed into a shrinking perimeter around Tunis and Bizerte. Fuel runs low, ammunition is rationed, reinforcements never arrive. The desert that once favored German mobile warfare now becomes a trap. In May 13, 1943, over 250,000 Axis troops surrender, the largest Axis capitulation of the war to that point. German and Italian soldiers, veterans of years of desert fighting, lay down weapons and march into captivity. The Africa Corps ceases to exist as a fighting force. North Africa is lost for the Axis. For the Americans, the cost is measured in more than territory gained. Over 18,500 casualties, killed, wounded, missing, captured. Entire tank battalions rebuilt from remnants. Hundreds of Shermans lost to 80 mm fire mines, mechanical failure, and inexperience. But the survivors are transformed. The tankers who landed in North Africa believing industrial superiority would guarantee victory now understand that war is learned through failure. The crews who bailed out of burning Shermans at Sidi now coordinate with infantry and artillery without needing orders. The officers who watched their formations disintegrate at Kasserine now plan operations with the caution that comes from knowing how quickly confidence turns to casualties. They carry scars, burns from hot metal shrapnel wounds that ache in cold weather, the invisible weight of friends who didn't make it out of wrecked tanks. They carry knowledge paid for in blood that terrain matters, that patience beats aggression, that survival depends on learning faster than the enemy can kill you. The 1st Armored Division, rebuilt and rested, begins preparing for the invasion of Sicily. The lessons of Tunisia hull-down tactics, coordinated fire, combined arms integration become doctrine. And the soldiers who survived North Africa look ahead to Italy, France, and Germany with the grim understanding that the hardest lessons are the ones that keep you alive. What remains when victory is measured not in miles gained, but in the survival of men who learned to transform defeat into competence. Tunisia becomes the crucible that shapes American armored doctrine for the rest of the war. The failures at Sidi and Kasserine force a comprehensive re-evaluation of tactics, training, and equipment. Tank destroyer battalions are reorganized to emphasize defensive fire rather than aggressive pursuit. Combined arms coordination, infantry armor, artillery, air support becomes standard rather than aspirational. The concept of all-arms cooperation stops being theory and becomes survival. The Sherman's vulnerabilities exposed in Tunisia are documented and addressed. Welded armor is reinforced in later variants. The 70-76mm high-velocity gun begins replacing the 75mm in 1944 production models. Wet ammunition storage stowing shells in water-jacketed bins reduces catastrophic fires when armor is penetrated. Suspensions are improved to handle European terrain. Dozer blades for clearing obstacles, extra track links welded to hulls for additional armor protection, and specialized recovery vehicles become standard equipment. But the most important legacy is not mechanical, it's psychological and doctrinal. The soldiers who survive North Africa understand something that cannot be taught in peacetime, that technology alone does not win wars. That industrial capacity means nothing if the men operating the machines lack the experience to use them effectively. That defeat absorbed and analyzed becomes the foundation for future victory. Normandy becomes possible because of Tunisia. The armored divisions that land in France in June 1944 are led by officers who learned their trade in the North African desert. The combined arms tactics that break through the hedgerows are refined versions of methods developed after Kasserine. The coordination that turns individual units into an effective fighting force is built on lessons paid for at Faid and Sidi Bou Zid. Rommel pulled from Africa in April 1943 to oversee the Atlantic Wall defenses faces an American army vastly different from the one he ambushed in early 1943. The Desert Fox's tactical genius still matters, but the Americans he will face in France are no longer rookies learning war from scratch. German anti-tank superiority, once absolute in Tunisia, erodes as American forces adapt their doctrine. The 80mm remains lethal throughout the war, but American tactics evolved to minimize exposure to long-range fire. Tank destroyers and artillery neutralize dug-in guns before armor advances. Air superiority, something the Germans never achieved in Tunisia and will never regain in Europe, grounds panzers in daylight and destroys supply columns before they reach the front. The balance shifts. Tunisia is where it begins to tip. El Guitar is the fulcrum, and every American soldier who fights across Europe carries with them the knowledge that their survival depends on lessons learned by men who didn't survive Tunisia's valleys. The North African campaign forges the U.S. Army into a force capable of Normandy, the Bulge, and the drive into Germany. Without Tunisia's brutal education, D-Day might have ended very differently. When the dust of El Guitar finally settles, the truth stands clear in the silence of the desert. The Shermans that once advanced with confidence now sit hull down on ridges, barrels, trained on approaches their crews have learned to read like maps written in threat and opportunity. The men inside those tanks are different, marked by burns, by loss, by the knowledge that survival is not a birthright, but a skill earned through failure and pain. North Africa doesn't offer glory. It offers a harsher gift, the understanding that war is a teacher without mercy, and the only students who graduate are the ones willing to learn from the dead. Machines may promise strength, production lines may churn out steel certainty, but only soldiers who rise from defeat, who adapt, who remember, who transform catastrophe into competence, can turn industrial power into battlefield victory. The desert honors them with silence. The wind erases tracks. The sun bleaches bones and rusted hulls until they disappear into sand that remembers nothing and forgives nothing. But the lessons remain. And in the years that follow, in the hedgerows of Normandy and the streets of German towns, in the final push across the Rhine, those lessons keep men alive who would otherwise have burned like their brothers did in the valleys of Tunisia. Mastery is not born from triumph. It is forged in the ashes of shattered certainty, shaped by hands that learned to tremble and then learned to hold steady, carried forward by men who understood that the price of learning is measured in friends who never came home. The desert remembers, even when we forget. If you want to see how ordinary soldiers forged extraordinary resilience from the fires of failure, the story of North Africa is just beginning. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in the crucible that shaped the Allied victory.